All right, what's up, everyone? Wanted to make a short video about braid. I get this question a lot about, what kind of braid to use, what size line, kind of what rod, reel, the whole combination. Being from Texas, being down here in the South, man, we get a lot of chances to throw braid. Especially right now, it's September. It's pretty hot outside, but as you can see, there's bushes, there's hay grass everywhere, there's pads everywhere, there's pepper grass everywhere, there's hydrilla in places. So we're allowed to throw a lot of top waters, a lot of flipping, a lot of things with braid on them, and not necessarily in certain times of the year. We can almost do it 9-10 months out of the year. We can usually throw something with braid. So I was going to break down a little bit about kind of what braid I throw and like the line size. We'll start at the smallest, and we're not talking spinning rods or anything. We're talking regular, casting rods and big reels and everything. For the most part, I won't go really less than about 30 pounds. 30-pound braid, Sunline braid is what I'll throw for like top waters, like a sexy dog, a sugar buzz, buzz bait, even like a small little whopper plopper, anything really small, or I'm going to work on top of the water. And what I mean by that is if I'm going to pop it or walk the dog with it, stuff like that, I'll go with 30. Just because it's a little easier to work with. It's a little bit smaller diameter. You can cast it really far. It's really smooth. What I will say is that I don't go, if I'm really going to be setting the hook really hard, you don't want to go with small braid. That's a big key right there. The smaller the braid, the more it'll get caught up in your reel. So like if you cinch it down, it'll get hung up there. And I'm sure everyone that fishes braid a lot, when you make that cast, after a whole bunch of casts or something, maybe 30-40 casts, a lot of times you'll just get a random backlash. It'll get hung up in there, especially after you set the hook on a fish. That braid will dig down in there right where you set the hook, right in your reel. So like, right there, if I set the hook right there, a lot of times that smaller braid will cinch down in there. So, I don't really want to be like just rearing back on 30-pound braid as hard as I possibly can. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to go up and braid. That's kind of where, you could kind of get into some 50. I don't throw a lot of 50 just because it's kind of one of those deals where it's in the middle. If I'm going to throw 50, I'm probably going to throw 60, 65, 80. And if I'm going to throw less than 50, it's probably going to be 30. So I don't mess with the 50 as much. I'm not saying there's not a time for it, but that's just one of my things that I just don't throw a lot. Probably the one size braid that I throw probably 75% of the time is it's new Sunline braid. It's their plasma braid. This stuff is unbelievable. I don't know if you can see it good right there. So they came out with this. I've got to use it for over a year now. Never broke off on it. And this is what's crazy. This line right here, and I don't know if you can see it, that's months old, and that is still green. You can still see it in the spool right there. It's still green. It holds its color really well. And here's what's really cool about it. So I'm not going to get all technical because that's what them guys that make the braid are for, but I can tell you one thing about it. It doesn't hold any water, and that's really important. And what I mean by that is as you're reeling it up, water doesn't stick onto that braid. And so what will happen is a lot of times when you're making a lot of casts and stuff, that water gets in there and it actually messes up the braid really well. You kind of really want it dry. It casts better. It doesn't have that drag when you throw it out there, so you can cast it a lot further. It's quieter. And so I've really been impressed with it. And I've been throwing braid for probably like 20 years now, so I've been through it all. I can honestly say I probably tried 10 different braids over the years. And when I say tried it for like a year, 6 months to a year. And a lot of them, man, I broke a lot of them after certain months. Like if you had it on there over a month, it'd break. Sometimes, a lot of times it frayed up in bushes or in pads, and I don't really like that. I don't like my braid fraying up real bad. So that's kind of what I throw like my popping perch on, pad perch. I'll throw big top waters on it. Like they got the new Mega Dog, I'll throw it on 65 just because it's such a big bait. That's kind of my deal. And before I go into reels, my last braid's my 80 pound. Now, this stuff is for like heavy flipping. So like if I'm gonna flip some of these big trees, these big bushes, the big hay, the thick hay, I mean, looks like you could walk across that hay. Pads where you can't even see water. Like if I'm gonna like throw a bait over those pads, I'm gonna go with 80. I'm gonna go with 80 all the time. There's no reason not to. And what I like about it is the fact that, man, I just don't want to have to worry about, breaking off. And I'm usually throwing a bait with a strong enough hook. I don't have to worry about bending the hook. So factor all those things in. That's kind of what I use. I got most of them. If you notice, I'm sure you can't see, but every reel I have with braid on it is a loose Super Duty. Whether it's an old loose Super Duty, because I've got some that are 5, 6, 7 years old, I still throw them. My new favorite though is the Super Duty 300. Okay, this is the new loose Super Duty 300. I want something really big. Their old loose Super Duties were good and everything, and I still like them, but I'm usually throwing, this pop and perch or this pad perch a really long ways. So I want to have a whole bunch of line capacity so I can throw it, and that keeps the gear ratio higher. So I want an 8-to-1. I don't want to go anything less than an 8-to-1, because I want to be able to throw out there, and so many times they hit this bait on the, as far as you can cast it, and they'll hit it at the end. So I want to be able to reel up line, pick up line as fast as I can, and I just want to crank on them. I mean, I got everything set up to where I can crank on an 8-pounder as hard as I can, and it's not going to come off. So I want a good heavy reel that can do it. That's why I have both of them for even on my pad perch. This is my kind of like my shark rod, I call it, and it's for the really heavy stuff. And I got the 80 on it just because I'm gonna throw it in a lot heavier stuff. I'll tell you the reason about braid and why you want a fast reel. I'll get technical here. So when you're throwing a regular rod out there with regular 20-pound fluorocarbon line on there with anything, when you load up, most rods you have for that have a pretty good parabolic bend, and the line it stretches. Okay, so when you're fighting one, you have all this, it's always kind of giving a little bit, always keeping pressure. Does that make sense? So even if they pull, the line's stretching, so there's always a little bit of pressure on there to where you can keep a good hook in it. It doesn't give it any slack. With braid, and usually the rods you throw with braid because they're a heavier power, when you hook on one, there's no stretch. So like instead of it fighting and being dragged in the water, the fish, you're actually pulling it through the water a lot faster, and a lot of times you turn its head and it starts going the way you turn it, which is usually towards you. So you have to be able to keep up with that, because if you're most of the time when you have a fish caught, it's turning its head, and you have enough, you don't have a lot of pressure on it, so it's able to turn its head and fight. A lot of times with braid, you pull them so hard that their head turns to you and that they start coming your direction. So you want to be able to keep up with them and keep tension on it. That's why you want a really high speed reel. That's why all 8-to-1s, and I want to put as much line on that reel as possible so I can crank on them really hard. So that's kind of my setup for braid. Like I said, the Sunline has really been, I've really been pleased with it. I've always been really skeptical of braid. I've gone through a lot of it, man, and I just, there's so much of it I don't really like. And so I was really happy with the Sunline plasma stuff. That stuff is just phenomenal. I would probably throw it in the 80. They don't make it in the 80. I'm gonna try to push for them to start making it in the 80 as well. But they make it in the 60 and the 50 and the 30, and they make it, I think, all the way down to 12. Or I'm not really sure. I'd have to go look. I know they have it. I know I have it in the 12 too. So go check some of that stuff out. Like I said, really keeps its color really well. It does a lot of things that I really like. And like I said, I know I fished this BFL this past weekend, and just both people that fished with me, man, they throughout the day I would hear them make cast, and about every 10 or 15 minutes I'd hear a guy and their bait would hit the water, and what was happening was that braid was getting hung up in their reels, and man, this Sunline braid just doesn't do that, and that's a headache. If y'all know what I'm talking about, that is a headache when that stuff happens. So check out that plasma braid, or you know, the other Sunline CeeLo braid. This stuff's really, really good. So anyways, thought I'd let y'all know that. Let me know if y'all have any success out there with it.